A parking lot. The kind behind any grocery store in any city. Asphalt cracked in familiar patterns, shopping carts scattered like lost sheep. A single human figure stands there, looking up at ordinary sky, the blue of any afternoon, unremarkable in every way. And then the sky disappears. Not darkens, disappears. Replaced by something curved and gray and so vast that the word big becomes meaningless. Something that blocks out the sun from horizon to horizon. Something that shouldn't exist, and yet there it is, filling every inch of visible space above your head like a second planet decided to park itself where clouds used to be. The Death Star. 120 kilometers in diameter. That's the distance from downtown Los Angeles to downtown San Diego, a drive that takes 2 hours on a good traffic day, condensed into a single spherical nightmare hovering above your neighborhood. It would cover all of Southern California like a malevolent moon, its surface pockmarked with trenches and towers and that single massive dish that could crack your planet like an egg. But here's the thing. That number, 120 kilometers, means nothing to your brain. It's too big. It breaks the rules of what objects should be. So let's build a ladder. Let's climb from the familiar to the incomprehensible, rung by rung, until you can actually feel what you're looking at. Then we'll talk about what the Death Star really was. Start with something almost friendly. The Ghost, Hera Syndulla's VCX-100 light freighter, the ship three of you specifically asked to see, measures 43.9 meters long. Virtually identical to an Airbus A321, those narrow-body jets filling regional routes across every continent. 34.2 meters wide, 14.5 meters tall, a 4.5-story building hovering where sky used to be. You asked for this ship. Here it is. Larger than the Millennium Falcon by nearly 10 meters, though decades of films have trained us to think otherwise. The Ghost would fill nearly half of a standard American city block. Keep that in your head. Half a city block. We're going to need that reference point. A TIE fighter screams down your residential street. 6.7 meters long with a wingspan of 6.4 meters, roughly the size of a large SUV with enormous solar panel wings attached. Standing 9.8 meters tall, about as high as a 3-story townhouse, it would barely fit between the parked cars. The Empire built them cheap and flew them cheaper. Pilots were replaceable. Terror was the product. The rebellion's answer was personal. The T-65 X-Wing measures 12.5 meters, about the size of a city bus. When Luke Skywalker flew his X-Wing through the Death Star trench in 0BBY, he was piloting something roughly equivalent in length to metropolitan transit equipment, against a space station 120 kilometers wide. Do you understand the insanity of that? A bus versus a moon. The LAAT gunship, low-altitude assault transport, ferried clone troopers during the Clone Wars that erupted in 22 BBY. 28.8 meters long, 17 meters wide, comparable to a tennis court sprouting repulsor lift engines. Picture it descending into a suburban backyard. Standing 8.8 meters tall, it would barely clear a standard 2-story house. Its troop bay doors opening above the family swimming pool. A human figure beneath a landing LAAT would have perhaps 3 seconds to contemplate their situation before armored soldiers poured out. Rest in peace to whoever gets caught under that thing. The scale is intimate in its violence. Not city-destroying, person-destroying. The CR-90 Corvette, Princess Leia's Tantive 4 from the opening moments of the original 1977 film, stretches 150 meters, 1.5 American football fields, including end zones. The Nebulon B escort frigate reaches 300 meters. The Statue of Liberty measures 93 meters from ground to torch tip. A Nebulon B would triple that length and keep going. The Venator-class Star Destroyer, the Republic's primary capital ship during the Clone Wars, measured 1,137 meters, roughly 3/4 of a mile. It would stretch from the center of any downtown to well past the outer neighborhoods. The Imperial-class Star Destroyer hit 1,600 meters, just 9 meters shy of a full mile. If one appeared above Manhattan, Its bow would hover over Times Square, while its engines blotted out the sky above the United Nations headquarters 48 blocks away. Nearly a mile of warship. But the Death Star? 120 kilometers is 75 times longer than an Imperial Star Destroyer. You could line up 75 of those mile-long nightmares end to end and still not match the Death Star's diameter. The Executor, Darth Vader's personal super star destroyer, measured 19 kilometers, nearly 12 miles. If it appeared above Los Angeles, it would stretch from Santa Monica to Glendale, covering the Hollywood sign, Griffith Observatory, and everything in between. The Executor is too big. It breaks the rules of what ships should be. And yet the Death Star is more than 6 times larger. 6 Executors could park inside the Death Star's super laser dish alone. This is why the Death Star exists in the realm of abstraction. At a certain point, scale stops being a number and starts being a feeling. The sublime terror of looking up and understanding that something has made you irrelevant. So let's talk about what it actually was. The Death Star wasn't just a space station. It was a statement, a philosophical argument rendered in durasteel and kyber crystals. The Empire's answer to a simple question. How do you make rebellion impossible? Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin understood something that most military strategists miss. Fear is more efficient than force. You can station a Star Destroyer above every major city on every major world, deploy stormtroopers to every street corner, monitor every communication, and still face resistance. Because resistance lives in the human heart, in that small, stubborn place that says no. But what if you could make that no feel pointless? What if you could demonstrate, in a single moment, that resistance wasn't just dangerous, but cosmically insignificant? The Death Star was designed to end hope itself. Construction began in secret, using slave labor from Geonosis and resources stripped from a dozen worlds. The station required over 1 million personnel to operate, a population larger than most planets' capital cities, floating through the void in an artificial moon. Life support systems, barracks, cantinas, recreation facilities, waste management for 1 million living beings. This wasn't a weapon. It was a mobile civilization, and at its heart, the super laser. Powered by massive kyber crystals, the same force-attuned gems that gave lightsabers their power, the super laser could focus enough energy to crack a planetary core. Not damage a city, not scorch a continent, destroy a world, completely, permanently. The engineering required to achieve this is almost impossible to comprehend. Consider, our own planet is 12,742 kilometers in diameter. The energy required to overcome the gravitational binding energy holding Earth together is roughly 2 times 10 to the 32nd power joules. That's more energy than the sun produces in a week. The Death Star could deliver that energy in a single shot, and recharge to fire again. Alderaan proved the concept worked. In 0BBY, Grand Moff Tarkin stood on the Death Star's command deck and ordered the destruction of Princess Leia Organa's homeworld. Not because Alderaan posed a military threat. It was a peaceful planet, known for art and diplomacy and absolutely no meaningful military infrastructure. That was the point. Tarkin destroyed Alderaan specifically because it was innocent, because the message needed to be clear. If we will do this to a peaceful world, imagine what we'll do to yours. 2 billion people. Gone. Not in war, not in battle, in a demonstration. The Death Star's super laser fired once, and a planet that had existed for billions of years became an asteroid field in approximately 0.7 seconds. 0.7 seconds. Every city, every ocean, every mountain, every person who had ever lived there, every record of their existence, every building and book and child's toy, annihilated so completely that the debris would never reform into anything larger than rubble. Imagine standing on Alderaan's surface when the beam hit. You wouldn't have time to see it. Light travels fast, but disintegration travels faster when you're inside the explosion. The people of Alderaan didn't die screaming. They simply stopped existing. Their atoms scattered across space before their neurons could register that anything was wrong. This is what the Death Star was built to do. Not to planets that resisted, to planets that might. And yet the Death Star had a weakness. The Imperial engineers who designed it made a decision, conscious or not, deliberate or careless, that would doom their creation. A thermal exhaust port, 2 meters wide, leading directly to the main reactor. 2 meters, in a station 120 kilometers in diameter. The odds of hitting that target were astronomical. The port was ray-shielded, so pilots couldn't use targeting computers for guided munitions. It required a direct hit from a proton torpedo, fired at precisely the right angle, while TIE fighters swarmed and turbo-laser batteries filled space with death. One shot in millions. Luke Skywalker, a farm boy from Tatooine who had been flying X-Wings for approximately 72 hours, took that shot. The Death Star.One exploded above Yavin 4, killing everyone aboard. Over 1 million personnel. Grand Moff Tarkin, the station's entire complement of troops, pilots, technicians, and officers. Gone in a flash brighter than the local sun. The Empire had built a weapon to end hope. And a single pilot with the Force behind him proved that hope could still win. They built another one. The Death Star-2 was larger, 160 to 200 kilometers in diameter, depending on which Imperial record you trust. Still incomplete when the Alliance discovered it orbiting the forest moon of Endor in 4 ABY, its skeleton frame visible through gaps in the superstructure. But the superlaser worked. Emperor Palpatine designed the second Death Star as a trap. He knew the rebels would come. He leaked the station's location deliberately, let the Alliance believe they could destroy it before completion. And then he waited. When the rebel fleet arrived at Endor, they found the Death Star's shields still operational, protected by a ground-based generator on the moon below. They found a fleet of Star Destroyers waiting in ambush. And they found, to their horror, that the incomplete Death Star could still fire. The superlaser carved through Mon Calamari cruisers like they were made of paper. 1,300 meters of capital ship. Liberty-type vessels carrying hundreds of crew. Annihilated in single shots, their debris scattering against the stars while their sister ships could do nothing but watch. Admiral Akbar's famous observation, "It's a trap," barely captures the despair of that moment. The Alliance had committed everything, every ship, every pilot, every hope for the galaxy's freedom. And the Emperor was using his planet-killing superweapon as an anti-ship gun. The ground team on Endor changed everything. Han Solo, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, and a strike team of commandos fought through Imperial forces with unexpected help from the moon's native Ewoks. They destroyed the shield generator. The Death Star-2 became vulnerable. Lando Calrissian flew the Millennium Falcon into the superstructure itself, navigating through half-completed corridors barely wide enough for his ship, and fired the shots that detonated the main reactor. The Death Star-2 exploded above Endor in 4 ABY. Emperor Palpatine died aboard it. Darth Vader died aboard it. The Galactic Empire, for all practical purposes, died with them. 2 Death Stars. 2 destructions. 2 moments when the impossible happened and the galaxy changed. But the legacy lived on. The First Order, rising from Imperial ashes 30 years later, looked at the Death Star's fundamental concept and asked, why build a station when you could weaponize a planet? Starkiller Base measured 660 kilometers in diameter, built into an existing planetary body, hollowed out and converted into a weapon that made both Death Stars look modest. Where the Death Star drew power from kyber crystals, Starkiller Base drained entire suns, storing the energy of a star to fire beams through hyperspace that could destroy multiple planets simultaneously. In 34 ABY, Starkiller Base destroyed the Hosnian system, 5 planets, including the New Republic's capital, obliterated in a single attack visible across the galaxy. Billions died. Again. And then the Resistance did what the Rebellion had done before. They found a weakness. They exploited it. They destroyed the weapon that was supposed to end all resistance. 3 times, the galaxy built weapons designed to make hope impossible. 3 times, hope won anyway. Go back to that parking lot, the one behind any grocery store in any city. asphalt cracked in familiar patterns, shopping carts scattered like lost sheep. A single human figure stands there, looking up. Imagine the Death Star above you, not as a number, not as 120 kilometers. Imagine it as what it actually is, something so large that it replaces the sky entirely. Something curved and gray and covered in structures that look like cities from this distance, because they are cities, housing populations larger than most nations, floating in the space where clouds should be. Imagine the shadow. Imagine looking at that super laser dish and knowing what it does. Knowing that Alderaan disappeared in 0.7 seconds. Knowing that every person you've ever met, every building you've ever entered, every memory you've ever made, all of it is trivial compared to the power hanging above your head. Imagine what it would feel like to be that small. That's what the Empire wanted. That's why they built it. Not just to destroy planets. They could have done that with sustained orbital bombardment, with asteroid redirection, with a dozen other methods that didn't require a moon-sized station. They built the Death Star to be seen, to hang in the sky of every world that considered rebellion and make the math obvious. You cannot win. You cannot hide. You cannot even comprehend the scale of what you're fighting against. Your entire planet is an afterthought. Your entire life is a rounding error. The most remarkable thing about the Death Star isn't its size. It's that people fought it anyway. When the first Death Star appeared above Yavin 4, the Rebel Alliance had 30 starfighters. 30. Against a station that could destroy their entire moon with a single shot. They flew anyway. When the second Death Star's super laser started picking off cruisers above Endor, the Mon Calamari fleet didn't retreat. They pressed closer to the Imperial Star Destroyers, knowing that the Death Star couldn't fire into the melee without hitting its own ships. They risked everything anyway. The Death Star was designed to make resistance feel futile, and the rebellion's answer was simple. Futility is not a reason to stop. The ships that fought against the Death Star tell their own story. The MC-80 Home-1, Admiral Akbar's flagship, measured 1,300 meters, longer than 4 Eiffel Towers laid end to end, a ship that would blot out neighborhoods if it appeared above your city. Against the Death Star-2, Home-1 was a gnat attacking a mountain, and it won. The Millennium Falcon, 34.75 meters of modified freighter, flew into the second Death Star's superstructure and destroyed the reactor. A ship smaller than a commercial airliner killed a moon. The X-wings that made the original trench run measured 12.5 meters each. The exhaust port they targeted was 2 meters wide. The station they destroyed was 120,000 meters in diameter. David versus Goliath doesn't capture it. This was a bacterium versus a continent, and the bacterium won. Tonight, when you walk outside, when you look up at your own sky, the one you've seen 1,000 times, imagine something dropping into frame. Start small, the Ghost filling half a city block, then the corvettes, the frigates, the star destroyers that stretch nearly a mile, then the Executor, covering 12 miles of your city in permanent shadow, and then, finally, the Death Star, 120 kilometers, 75 miles, the distance from Los Angeles to San Diego, compressed into a sphere of gray metal and existential dread, hanging where the sun used to be. Imagine looking up at that. Imagine understanding, in your bones, what it would feel like to be that small, that irrelevant, that completely at the mercy of something that could erase your entire world without slowing down. The Empire built the Death Star to create that feeling. And somehow, impossibly, against every rational calculation, people looked up at it and said, "No, we're going to fight you anyway." That's the real scale comparison. Not kilometers versus meters, not populations versus individuals. It's the scale of human defiance against the machinery of despair. And defiance, it turns out, is bigger than any battle station ever built. You asked to see rebel ships. You asked to see the Ghost. You asked to see what these things would look like above your city. But what you really wanted to see was the Death Star, the thing that makes all other ships look small, the thing that makes your entire world look small. Now you know what it is. Now you know what it meant. Now you know why people fought it and why they won. Subscribe for more stories like this.